Cena. Pete Tallman.
Here.
Brian Farnan. Drew Georgiadis. Ken Lee. Here. Bill Perugini.
Here.
Sam Cargill. Paul Fattabine. Michael Hurley. Eric Sundman.
Would you all please rise for the pledge? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. The first item on the agenda this evening is Department 6010 Health. Welcome, Mr. Cleary.
Thank you very much.
Our members were all instructed to watch the Board of Finance meeting, so we'll just go to Q&A unless there's anything you need to highlight for us.
We just have a small...
Anybody have any questions for the Health Department? None? Great.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Next item, 6050, Health and Human and Social Services. Welcome. We received your presentation. Many of us were able to attend your wonderful open house that you had for all of us. So if you just want to introduce yourselves for the record, and then we will just go straight to Q&A.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Terry Geoghegan, and I'm the Director of Human Services. I'm Julie DeMarco. I'm the Senior Center Manager.
Great. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, miscellaneous not-for-profit organizations, 2130 Pequot Library. Welcome.
Thank you.
Can you just introduce yourself?
I'm Stephanie Coakley, Executive Director of the Pequot Library.
Thank you for being here this evening. Does anybody have any questions for the Pequot Library? Representative Vergara.
Hi, Jill Vergara, District 7. I was curious if you had the numbers of people who have attended the library this year?
Sure. In the last the last fiscal year, over 105,000 visitors, nearly 40,000 in programs.
Do you have any idea of how much money, how much of the funding goes towards programs at the library?
The town of Fairfield supports the Pequot Library's annual operating budget of 30%, and our programs budget is quite lean. We do a lot with very little at Pequot Library, I'm proud to say, and I could give you those specific figures right away via email, but off the top of my head, the town of Fairfield supports all of our interpretive programs at the Pequot Library, 30% again of our annual operating support. And we have a variety of programs throughout the year for all ages, as you know. But if you'd like that specific breakdown, I'm happy to provide that.
It would be helpful, thank you.
You're welcome, Jill.
Representative Orris.
Hi, Robin Orris, District 3. I asked you last year what percentage of your operating budget we provide, and I think you just offered to Representative Vergara 30%.
Yes.
Seeing as the tone in Connecticut and the problems in the state budget last year and this year, has that number changed?
It's been level funding since 2009, and we are forever grateful for the support of the taxpayers of Fairfield in the amount of $350,000.
In the last year, from last budget cycle to tonight, have you had any additional fundraising events?
Yes, just this Saturday we hosted a most successful event. We're fundraising every day of the year at Pequot Library. We raise this 70% of our operating budget and 100% of our capital budget in the form of revenue-generating initiatives like renting our beautiful music hall, special events, fundraisers, the generosity of numerous individual supporters throughout the area, small family foundations, small government support, in addition to the extremely generous support of the town of Fairfield, obviously.
Thank you. Any further questions on Pequot? Representative Vergara? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, I love the programming that you have. I just saw something offered for folk tales, Native American folk tales, which looks awesome, and I'm definitely planning on going with my daughter. I did notice that oftentimes with your programming, there's a fee, which is different from the main library. Do you have a spreadsheet that could show how much revenue you generate from the programming and how many people are attending from Fairfield?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to put that together. For the most part, our programs are free to little cost, and the majority of our fee-based programs are our music events, but again, most of those are free, and any other fee-based programs are not too numerous, I would say, throughout the year. They're after-school camps, summer camps, those kinds of things, and those fees go directly to support the teaching artists or musicians in the case of our music programs to help offset those costs.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Lee?
Ken Lee, District 9. I noted today at a message from the library that your children's librarian passed away, and I used to take my daughter there when she was young, and I'm sure I speak for more people than you can imagine how sad I am so to hear that. She was a wonderful, did a lot of wonderful things for the library, and I just wanted that to be publicly acknowledged. Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you. Well said, Representative Lee. Anybody else? Representative Zezima.
Liz Esma, District 4, my condolences as well. Your late book fees, do they go back into your library budget or into another fund within the town?
Directly to the Pequot Library budget.
Okay. And my apologies if I missed this in a previous session, but if there were to be any cuts to your funding, do you know in what area you would be?
It's a lean, modest budget at Pequot Library, and I'm sad to say that I would have to take a really serious look at our operating hours and reduce our services in the form of hours that we are open, and I'm proud to say that we're open 7 days a week right now, and I'd really have to take a look at that. Other areas to perhaps cut back on would involve supplies and book purchasing funds, and that would be really devastating to the community that utilizes our library.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no one else, thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Next item is 2250 Fairfield Museum and History Center. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. Mike Jaley, Executive Director of Fairfield Museum.
Great. Any questions on the museum? Representative Vergara.
Hi.
District 7. I didn't see a revenue side for the Fairfield Museum. I know that there are some revenue generators like the walking tours and Burr and
Right. So your question is what our revenue is?
what your revenue is annually.
So our budget is roughly the same size as Pequot Library. It's 1.3 million. We raise that from a wide variety of sources, from earned income, program fees, what have you. About half of that comes from grants and contributed income, and another portion of that is from our endowment. So, town funding is less than 4% of that.
So is there ever a breakdown of how much revenue you make from the town assets, like the historic buildings?
We don't really make money from the town assets. So we manage the Burr Mansion as part of our town agreement. And the money generated from that pays for the costs of its rental, a manager, its cleaning, and its maintenance. There's no, beyond the sort of management fees the management income that generates to turn back into it, there's no profit out of those buildings.
With the opening of Sun Tavern and all the other buildings on the town green, are you anticipating any additional revenue from that?
You know, I think we'll have to see. So we have been successful raising over $1 million in outside funding to restore and open these town-owned properties. We are opening them at sort of minimal fees to try, and several times free to the community. We're trying to generate interest and use of these properties. I think that we're going to be experimenting this summer to see what the fee generation possibilities are.
Because as I understand it, the walking tours are always sold out.
Yep.
So it would be a great way to raise some revenue for the town if people there's a great interest for it.
Well, the revenue raised from that doesn't go to the town, it goes to the Fairfield Museum.
Okay.
So we are an independent nonprofit organization, we're not part of the town.
That's what I didn't understand.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we're not a town agency.
Any other questions on the museum? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item, Culture and Recreation, 7010 Library Main Branch. Good evening, just introduce yourselves and we'll go right to Q&A.
Yeah, good evening, Town Librarian Karen Ronald and Deputy Town Librarian Nancy Coriati.
Thank you. Questions on the main library? Seeing none, we'll go on to the branch library. 7011 Library Fairfield Woods Branch. Any questions on the branch? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here this evening. Thank you. Public Safety, 4010 Fire.
Good evening, Dennis McCarthy, Fire Chief, Emergency Management Director, and Deputy Chief Karen Dunn.
Excellent. Thank you both for being here this evening. Questions on the fire department? Seeing none, we'll go on to, do you guys handle 41? Yeah.
Emergency Management.
Good,
Yep.
yeah. Any questions on 4150, emergency communications?
Nope, Emergency Management.
Oh, emergency management, I'm sorry. Anything on emergency management? That's the police. Oh, seeing none, we're all set.
We also have the water service, water budget for hydrants.
That's okay, we're good.
Good, thank you very much.
Public safety, 4150 emergency communications and 4030 police. Good evening, everyone. Just introduce yourselves for the record and we'll go straight to Q&A.
Sure. Gary McNamara, Chief of Police, Chris Liddy, Deputy Police Chief, and Don Smith, Captain of ECC.
Welcome this evening. Questions for the police department? Representative Vergara.
Hi, Jill Vergara, District 7. Can you apportion the kind of costs that you incur from Sacred Heart and Fairfield U? Do you have any idea of how much of your funds or how many costs can be apportioned to them?
It would be a little difficult. I don't have it certainly with us now. I mean, I could certainly provide you with a call volume. Probably, I don't have any mechanism right now to break that down as to what the cost would be.
About how many functions a year do they have in each of those universities that you attend, that you have to be present at?
So, depending upon the function, generally, if there are functions that we're going to be at, they would be paying us, our officers, to be there. Basketball games, concerts, a variety of other things that they're required to have a police presence, they would be paying us for that. That we could get free, I don't have it now. As far as those incremental costs of just existing, I mean, we certainly respond to Fairfield University for calls for service. We respond to Sacred Heart University for calls for service also. So we would probably be able to break that down as far as the number of calls we go there for service, but I don't have that in front of us right now.
Were you paid for the Trump rally?
Yes, we were not by Sacred Heart University. There was a portion of the costs expended by the Trump campaign.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to get you a breakdown? Would that be helpful to get that breakdown?
That would be great, thank you.
Representative Wall.
Jay Wolk, District 5. First, I want to say thank you for coming and everything that you guys do for our town. I personally appreciate everything that each one of you do. So my question is, goes every year that we go through this, is cars. I think every year we ask for, are you okay with the amount of new cars that you guys need and the ones that are going into service? And I remember every year you ask for a certain amount, and I guess the budget only allows you to buy a certain amount. So how's that going?
Yeah, we, obviously, one of the discussions that we always have, which is important discussion to have, is about the vehicles. And obviously, all of you recognize the fact that our police officers generally travel with the vehicles that are provided for them. So over the course of many, many years, just to rehash the people's memory of it, we have a replacement plan in effect. And that replacement plan was 12 vehicles a year. And that was in existence for probably 15 to 20 years of replacing vehicles that the officers use, not necessarily taking the new ones out of service, but trickling them down to other services that the police officers perform. And that, unfortunately, that 12 vehicle rotation became too costly for us. Not necessarily the 12 vehicles, but all the equipment that the vehicles, that our police officers have in the vehicles and are required to have in the vehicles, that cost has gone up. So rather than continue to make that dramatic jump in costs, we've modified that to a 10-vehicle rotation of our vehicles. Several years ago, we were able to drop that to 8 vehicles because 2 vehicles we did not purchase in a timely fashion due to a car accident. So the following year, we purchased 8 vehicles and asked for those 8 vehicles. This year, we originally started our request for 10 vehicles, and those 10 vehicles would replace some of our frontline vehicles. Now, those frontline vehicles don't necessarily sit in the parking lot. They then trickle down to other functions within the organization. For those of you who remember, most recently, we have a school safety unit that did not exist several years ago. Those officers require vehicles to get to and from the school. So we've expanded that, and some of those vehicles spread out depending upon what function the officers provide. So this year we came in with a determination of getting 10 vehicles. We were fortunate enough to, with our partnership with the Westport Police Department, we have an indication that we are going to get 2 donated vehicles. For those of you who might have watched the Board of Finance meeting, they are 2 Teslas. They're electric vehicles, but Tesla is donating those vehicles to the Fairfield Police Department in an effort to, I guess, explore the market of electric vehicles into police work. Currently, the Tesla models are only utilized in LA, so that's the test market, and now they're coming here. So the Westport Police Department and the Fairfield Police Department will each receive 2 Teslas. Included in that is full operational vehicles, as well as the requirements for the electric charging stations. So the cost really to the town are nil, and it gives us an opportunity to see how those are going to operate. How they're going to function and what purpose in the department, I don't necessarily know yet. We're still trying to work through that. But it enabled us to then come back with the first selectman and say we can trim our budget even a little more, keeping in mind that our budget at the time was, I think, about a 0.2% reduction. Now, with taking those vehicles out, cutting our fuel usage a little bit, given that we're going to get the electric vehicles, and then taking out a request for 2 light bars as a result of that, also we're able to drop it down. So to answer your question in a long-winded, roundabout way, certainly the request we have for the vehicles right now, I believe, is the request that should be granted.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Representative Ambrose.
Yes, good evening, Chief. Peter Ambrose, District 1. Again, following up on Representative Wilk's comment, I want to commend both your department and the fire department for the exemplary service you give to the town. Having said that, now that GE has departed from Fairfield, do we still need to have that one cruiser sitting outside GE's headquarters 24/7?
Yeah, no. Well, the answer to that is no. And the vehicle is not there any longer. It's removed from that.
So it's available for other usage?
Well, yeah, just because you asked the question, I'll kind of explain a little bit
Sure.
further. Shortly after September 11th attack, and given the high profile that General Electric had within the world, GE was hiring officers on an overtime basis to cover their front desk 24 hours a day for several years. All officers on overtime. And I think over a period of time, GE realized that that was a hefty cost to bear. So over the years, GE had provided us with AEDs for our vehicles. They provided donations to our K-9 account. And so over time, and certainly prior to when I was chief, when we pulled out the police profile, a used old vehicle sat there. There was nothing in it. I think there were lights on top of it, but other than that, it really was not functioning. That was a vehicle that we would have gotten rid of, in effect gotten rid of anyway. So while it sat there, it really was a shell, and it gave an opportunity for GE at the time to feel a little bit comforted. You may see a police vehicle periodically on the west campus of Sacred Heart University, the old GE property. We have reached an agreement with Sacred Heart University several months ago, well, probably coming up on a year now, that they are hiring an officer off duty, not one officer, it's open for any officer who wants it during the most high presence of the students on campus. So there is a vehicle up there that they paid for, that Sacred Heart paid for, that exists on the Sacred Heart property, that the officers, when they're on the overtime basis, which Sacred Heart pays for, they exist up there. So periodically you'll drive by, even off hours, and that vehicle will be sitting on Sacred Heart property. They paid for the vehicle. It's fully equipped with all of the necessary equipment that we would need in patrol, but it stays there because they paid for it. However, it really will roll into our fleet if they ever determine that the position wasn't available up there.
Representative Georgiades.
Hi, Chief. Hi, Deputy Chief. Drew Georgiades, District 9. I have two questions. I'm unfamiliar with the work attendance bonus, and I'd like you to explain that to me. I'd also, some situations that happened in the last 12 months, I was curious if any of your officers need legal help. Does that come through the union, and does that never impact the town?
So the work attendance bonus, I think, is contractual, and I think if officers are given a bonus of, and I don't have the exact amount of money. So if they, within a 6-month period, do not take a sick day, they are given 1 day of pay. So that's where that.
And their sick days are negated, or they hang on to their sick days?
Yeah, they're not negated. They're held in a bank. But keep in mind that the officers, upon retirement, are not paid for their sick time.
Oh, right.
I know sometimes those other questions, those ancillary questions pop up. So yeah, they're not paid for their sick time. So we don't pay out officers sick time. So that just remains in their bank.
And
Now the other question.
The legal issue, if an officer needs legal help surrounding his job, is that handled by the union?
So if while serving the town of Fairfield, an officer is sued in the capacity of a police officer, the town represents that police officer.
Because there's no legal line item, right?
I believe that would come through the town legal department.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Tallman.
Hi, Chief Peter Tallman, RTM District 8. I've seen some of your clips on television, so I think you have a future after being the police chief.
Thank you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy where I'm at. Thank you.
I just had a question. On the overtime, and I realize that's difficult to manage, but it's such a huge number, pushing $3 million. Are there any ways around that? I know it's probably less expensive in the long run to pay overtime than to hire more people to the force, but I'm just looking at the numbers and wondering if there's any way we can manage it a little better or work it out a little bit better, but like I said, it's a lot of dough. It's close to $3 million.
Well, keep in mind, some of that overtime is for training, overtime, so I believe it's probably 380, maybe? Well, we got the line here.
Yeah, close to it.
2 million.
380.
Okay, so just about 380 is for overtime for training. So,
What is that, like overtime for training?
so the officers, you would be amazed at the amount of training that the officers have to go through.
No, I'm sure.
And while a lot of it, well, and I shouldn't even say a lot of it, a very limited amount of it can be done on duty. Because when we send officers out on the road, they're out responding to calls, and this past year we've seen our highest number of calls for service that we've seen ever since I've been a police officer, and that's 29 years. So our calls for service are up. So to take officers off the road while they're working, and then to give them training, and the training generally is in a 15-minute block of training. It's at a very least probably 4-hour block of training. Most of the time that has to be done on overtime. So when the officers are off duty, they come in and do training, or if they're on duty and we pull them off for a significant block of time, we have to put someone in their spot to respond to those calls for service. We always look at ways in which we can, our budget is a very lean budget. Over the last 10 years, our budget roughly has gone up about 19% over a 10-year period. If you look at some of the surrounding towns, that's a lot higher increase than the 19% that we have. So we try to keep a very lean budget, and recognizing that overtime is a big number in our budget. It is not taken lightly. When officers are on vacation, when we have calls for service, when the demands of the department or the community require more officers, we put those officers out and deploy them out there. And I'll just give you a few instances of it. If we have a neighborhood that is requiring more police presence because of ongoing problems, well, oftentimes we'll look and see whether or not we can pull officers from other shifts, other areas of town to assist with that. Oftentimes we can't because the demands are too much, so we have to oftentimes get officers that are off duty and bring them in to do that. There are times when some of the call volume and the intricacies of some of the calls require hours after that 8-hour shift, and if an officer is engaged in an arrest or a significant call, he or she then has to remain over to finish off that work. So we don't take that overtime line lightly and recognize that it is a large number. However, I believe that the community, I believe that the town of Fairfield requires a police presence and a significant police presence at time, and generally that overtime budget allows us to do that.
Thank you.
Representative Ambrose?
Yes, Chief. Peter Ambrose, District 1. Are those officers paid overtime while they're receiving training?
Well, if they're on duty, they don't double dip. So if you come in today at 8 in the morning and you're going to training, is that what you were asking?
Yeah.
So if you're going to training, then you're going to training and somebody will come in and fill that spot for you. You're not getting extra pay to do that training.
Okay.
So whether or not you're getting overtime because you're going to training or somebody is coming in to replace you because you're in that training.
So they're not receiving overtime while they're being trained?
No, unless they're off duty completely.
Does that happen often?
A lot of the training that we do is off duty, yeah. I mean, our firearms program annually, we utilize firearms 4 times a year. Our largest block of firearms training is an 8-hour block of training. That can't be done on duty. Officers have to be off duty to do that. So we bring in officers off duty to do that 8-hour training. However, our night training, the police department has a 5-lane range, firearms range in the basement. So we bring officers in to do low light or dark training, night training. And that oftentimes takes an hour because it's right there in headquarters and we can zip people in and we let them do their training and leave. Oftentimes that training is done while they're on duty, meaning that for 1 hour of time, other officers are really significantly covering those patrols, knowing that the officers are in doing that training. In that case, it doesn't incur any overtime.
Representative McCarthy.
I'll pay you later. Chief, thanks again for service to town. Not only that, as a taxpayer, I appreciate what a well-managed budget you have. I'm just going over your personnel summary quickly, and I count 7 head count, which are non-police officers, which leaves 108, and I think you're down, your actuals are actually down 3 below. Do you expect to be up to full complement by July 1st?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
We were only up to 108 officers for about a week last year, in that it was June when we finally got up to 108, and then July when somebody retired. So currently, you're absolutely correct. We have 108 sworn, we're down to 105. We have 2 certified officers that we're looking to hire soon, and will probably be hired prior to the end of June. However, we already know that 2 officers are retiring in July, which will then leave us 2 more down, and then we anticipate 2 or 3 officers retiring by December. So it's a constant upkeep and battle to get officers hired and trained and on the road because of the significant gap in hiring to actually on the road. Keep in mind, if the officer is not trained, that means that they test and they are new to the field of law enforcement. They are hired and go to the academy while we pay them, so we don't get the benefit of their service. They spend roughly 8 months prior to getting any value to the town. So it takes a while to get them up and running. So being down 3, we're anticipating hiring 2 who are certified, meaning that they're already sworn officers. So we save the money of the training time, and they'll be out on the road a lot sooner. In the last 5 years, we've hired 17 new officers. 9 of them have been certified officers, meaning that they were prior certified, and the time to get them on the road is significantly reduced because they are already trained from another organization.
Thanks. I think that's good people management.
Representative McDermott.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. And thank you, gentlemen, for coming tonight, and thanks for your service to the town. I really appreciate it. I'd just like to circle back to the Fairfield U and Sacred Heart U scenario. I understand from your answer to Representative Vergara that we are charging fees for special events, let's say. I was wondering, maybe you can educate me, what is the relationship between Fairfield Police and those 2 departments? And are we making calls there, or is it their jurisdiction, or how does that work?
So first of all, our relationship is good. We have to maintain a good relationship. Obviously, that is a significant population that requires a lot of assistance from the police and public safety, whether it be poor choices in drinking, whether it be drugs or other issues that are occurring, whether it be providing role models and training so that they are not the victims of sexual assault or other crimes. So it's a population that we have to interact with well. While our relationship with both universities is equal, they both bring different things to the table. The Fairfield University has a public safety department that is trained very, very well. They are armed, so they have a lot of similar training that we have. They do not have powers of arrest, meaning that they can do certain things on campus, but when it comes to enforcing the laws, that is still is maintained by the Fairfield Police Department. So so generally, they will handle things in-house if they choose to. However, there are certain things that they cannot do in-house that they have to turn over to us, and we'll respond for that. You know, medical calls, if there are medical calls that require an ambulance, the fire department responds and the police department responds up to those calls. If they encounter any drugs, they don't have the authority to do anything with that. It's illegal for them to possess it also. So we go up there and do an investigation and take the appropriate action. Obviously, if there's assaults on campus or crimes on campus, while they may investigate them, if there's any sort of prosecution going to come from any of that stuff, it has to be through the Fairfield Police Department. On the other hand, Sacred Heart University, their public safety unit is not armed. And so they're a little less engaged on their own, meaning that they require a little more service from us if warranted. And again, I don't know which university calls us more, but being that they're not armed, being that their public safety is a little less trained, that requires a little more service from us. So
I guess my question is, and I mean, it's unfortunate that they would have to call you guys, but because of people not acting properly, but is there any way we can charge them for service calls, or is it just they're part of the public domain of Fairfield? They're private universities, but
yeah, I think that's the question that's certainly outside of my realm. I can provide you with the information on the number of times we go there. There are more times that we go there than are just calls for service, I can tell you that. It's because police officers have to build relationships. And so the relationships that we build with the universities don't start when the calls happen. We have to have mutual respect. They have to respect us, and they have to know our capabilities coming forward. So our officers will periodically go up to the universities, engage the universities in different things. Many of our officers are attending Sacred Heart University for their bachelor's degree as well as their master's degree. Sacred Heart is giving us 50% off any officer that wants to get their master's degree, which they pay for on their own, and they have a criminal justice program up there. So the interactions are significant. And then the calls for service, whether or not the town decided to charge for that, that would be something that would be outside really my realm. I could be part of the discussion, but I don't think it would be appropriate for me to be the one driving that discussion.
Okay. So the unfortunate tragic incident last week, you guys were on the scene at Sacred Heart, or the girl who unfortunately passed away from the pancake eating contest?
Yeah, our officer, we had an officer up there who was on the overtime detail, and we also had officers that were on Park Avenue at the time of the call doing DUI enforcement. So when that call came in, officers were there rather quickly to the scene. Just, kind of to close the loop here, tragically and unfortunately, even though they were there and desperately tried all they could, heroically tried all they could to ultimately get air into her lungs, they were unsuccessful. So, tragically. But yeah, so that's an example of us just being in the right place at the right time and getting there fairly quickly.
And then I see Fairfield U kids throwing beer bottles at you at the train station too, so thank you.
We, yeah, exactly. Well, look, I mean, oftentimes people always respect and like the police, but we also understand that the police are oftentimes the target of people's frustration and anger. We accept that, we acknowledge it, but at the same time, if those people throwing beer bottles needed us for something else, we'd certainly respond and give them the best service we can.
Thank you. Representative Perugini.
Good evening, gentlemen. Bill Perugini, District 9. Just to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, thank you for your service to our town. And we've worked together on several issues. So Representative McDermott brought up Fairfield University. I know there was talk with Dean Donahue and Mr. Pellegrino about increasing the funding for cars down there in the beach area on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights. Has that changed appreciably this year versus other years relative to the funding that the university has agreed to provide?
No, it's the consistent and same amount of funding and model that they've provided in at least the last few years, correct? Yeah.
And do you feel that's sufficient, or do we need additional subsidies from them? I know there was a big episode, I was out of town for the Super Bowl, and there have been a number of incidents, although I think this year's better than last, and thank you for those reports that you send on a weekly basis. So I think this crew is better than prior, but there have been a couple of challenging episodes down there. Do you find what they're providing to be sufficient to date?
I think we're thankful for what they're providing. It has always been a challenge down there. The warmer weather is just about to hit us. We look at it every single week. Sometimes we have to augment it on our own. Sometimes we have to pull resources from other areas of town to handle the volume at the beach and the different problems. And you're right, every year is a little bit different just because of the clientele, the type of students that we're dealing with. This particular year has been fairly good, other than a few unique incidents that have happened, but they were very significant incidents.
Thanks. And so one other question, and thank you for your fiscal prudence with the budget. I noticed that the only line item that was up appreciably was motor vehicle fuel and lube, and again, still below the peak in 2014. And interestingly enough, we're moving towards the Teslas, which I think is fascinating. That's the first I've heard, and I know they're pioneers in self-driven automobiles. Is that the idea, to pilot a program whereby you'll have, self-driven patrol vehicles? Is that why they're so generous with law enforcement?
Self-driven?
Yeah.
I don't think we're...
Yeah. So indeed,
Yeah.
just as with GE having an automobile out there, and that presence has a psychological impact, as you're well aware. But is that the forward thinking? Is that the vision for Tesla that you're aware of? Will the self-driven?
I don't think so. I think what the vision of Tesla is that they recognize that as the communities move towards electric vehicles, they're also moving in that way in a public forum. So I think that they look at this as an opportunity to jump into that realm and test the waters, per se.
They'll be fun to drive.
They will be, they will be, just to back up so everybody understands the question, because it was brought up with regards to Sacred Heart, and we talked about it with Fairfield University. Obviously, there's a big demand at times down in the beach area, given the amount of students that live down in the beach area. So we've worked out an agreement with Fairfield University that on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, they hire an officer to patrol that area. Now, we also have officers down there, but they are supplementing, recognizing that there is an increased demand, so they do pay for that. So there are some little nuggets of costs that they do absorb.
And I just add, with that realm, not only do they hire the officer, they put a school administrator in our police car with our officer. So we're handling both any criminality that happens, and then also any administrative sanctions would be immediately addressed through the university.
And they're paying for that.
They are paying for that, yes.
Thank you. That's great. Representative Hurley. Oh, sure.
Hi, Michael Hurley, RTM District 10. Good evening, Chief, Deputy Chief, and Captain. Obviously, I think everyone in the room agrees you guys do a terrific job. It's a very lean budget. I did have one question, sort of follow-up based on what you were talking about with your partnership with Sacred Heart University. And if you don't have the answers tonight, it's okay. But I would just be curious to know what percentage of the police department has bachelor's degree, what percentage have master's degree, how does that stack up to other communities, how are you marketing that program internally, and do you believe that having a more highly educated police force helps you to drive efficiencies in your department?
So I think there are roughly 58, so we have 108 officers. I think there are probably over 58, roughly 58 officers that have their bachelor's degrees. I know there are 2 more that are, I think, completing this spring from Sacred Heart University. And as far as the masters go, I think there's 5 or 6. So 5 officers that have their master's degrees, and one that has his law degree. And there are several officers with bachelor's degrees that are currently taking master's programs at Sacred Heart University to get their master's. I don't know how that stacks up to other departments. I do believe that well-educated officers are important. I don't necessarily think that that's the only thing that makes a good officer is education. We have officers that come from a variety of different backgrounds, and it's important that we have that. Oftentimes, when people think of diversity, they think only of one particular way you can be diverse. We look at experiences as being diversity, whether you own a business, whether you have been a stay-at-home dad, or whether or not you were in law school or whatever. You can certainly contribute. It's the entire package of the officer. I do believe that an officer with a college degree is better able to meet some of the challenges that are presented to us. There have been several studies, I can't quote them, that indicate that an officer that has a degree is less likely to use force. I don't have that in front of me, but certainly anecdotal can comment to that. So I do think that we are moving in the right direction of educated police officers. Now, that does not take away from the fact that we have officers that have chosen not to get their college degree, and I would never minimize that fact. Officers receive the training, and we have a very strong group of engaged men and women that serve the community. I just think that it's important that we have that robust ability to communicate effectively. This job has become more and more challenging as the years have gone by. Just as all of you in the room, all of us in the community, if you look at technology, if you look at the fact of driving cars that are driving themselves, and certainly we don't have any in the town of Fairfield yet, but if you look at the way we respond to the issues that are facing our communities, these jobs are very, very complex jobs. Any of the technology you deal with, our officers have to deal with it. Any of the issues that you all face, our officers are facing, let alone the spike and the increase in people who are having problems, who are concerned, who are upset. These officers, the officers we have, are not just officers that pin a badge on. They're friends, they're counselors, they're people that try to get to the root of issues and problems. So we spend a lot of time dealing with those things, and besides the college education, it's a lot of education on the job. But I do think that college, if people choose to do that, is significant, and I'm happy that more officers are doing that.
That's great. Thank you for the perspective.
Hi, Drew Georgiadis, District 9. I have a comment and a question. The comment is regarding the Tesla. I'm very excited because obviously they don't idle, and while they're sitting there, I'm sure that they will generate less emissions, and that's good for the town, especially when they're around schools and whatnot. So that's very exciting. My question goes back to Mr. Tallman and Representative Ambrose's question regarding the overtime. Can you outline for me, is a 40-hour, I'm from the private sector, so 40 hours is a full-time, and anything over that, is that when the overtime comes in, is the 40 hours or the whatever's designated as full-time, is that negotiated by the unions? Is it by the law that because of the type of work that you do, that a full hour, full-time week is 39.5, or could you please explain that to me,
Well, the officers work, their shift is 4 days on and 2 days off. So they work a 37.5-hour work week. However, their overtime is based on an 8-hour shift. So if they work anything over 8 hours, they will get overtime for that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Gale.
Hi, Hannah Gale, District 6. Chief, did you say earlier that call volume was unusually high in comparison to recent years? And if so, what do you attribute that to?
Well, yeah, we've seen an increase of up to, I think our call volume is 51,000 calls for service. I just think the demands that the community is requesting of us.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
I think it's really just attributed to the, I'm sorry to be looking away from you, it's rather odd, but the microphone is here. I think it's just that our call volume has increased, our demand for services has increased. We have a full-time school unit Obviously, school is off in the summertime, but they're there. So I think our call volume has increased, our motor vehicle activity has increased. So we've seen a more demand for services that is driving that. Our larcenies this past year were up from prior years. We attribute that to a lot of car break-ins. Many of you may have had neighbors or friends or victims yourselves of car break-ins. We saw an increase in stolen cars this year, not singularly to the town of Fairfield. We know in the region and frankly in the state, car thefts were increasing, so it wasn't unique to the town. We've made some very successful arrests in that area. But I think our call volume is up based upon a variety of those things, including a slight increase in the calls for service surrounding some of those larcenies.
I see. So you anticipate it continuing to rise?
Well, we always take effort and look towards efforts to reduce the crime. Last year we saw a reduction in crime. This year we saw an increase in crime. So our crime is kind of has its slight ups and downs. So obviously we look towards doing that. As far as the demands for service, we're being asked to do more. We're frankly being asked to do a lot of things. And so I don't anticipate that need or that call volume will go down. I don't.
What do you mean by being asked to do more? By businesses, by the schools, by the universities?
I think, I won't dig any further into the unknown because I don't have it in front of me with regards to some of the specific drivers of the calls for service. But generally, what we're finding is that the community needs for us are increasing. So whether or not it is because truck traffic has increased on Reef Road, and our officers are out there enforcing the truck traffic. Whether or not there's increased in demands at the schools and our school unit, I think what we found is as we engage more as officers, and certainly we see that also, that our officers are engaging more, meaning they're stopping by businesses more, they're engaging the community in a lot of crime prevention efforts, I think you'll see the need increasing. As far as crime goes, I'd like to say that our dedication and determination will continue to see that crime level drop, and we always look towards ways to do that. One way is for people to lock their car doors, and that's a simple crime prevention tool that you can utilize, and what we find is oftentimes cars are broken into and the doors are unlocked, cars are stolen and the keys are in the car. So we're always looking at ways to reduce crime. Those numbers are so small that 51,000 calls for service, our crime, I think our larceny crimes went up by 40 larcenies. Now that's small if it's not us, but if you are the victim of a larceny, that's pretty important. But that's a small compared to that 51,000 calls for service. So what's driving it are the other things besides the crime. And I want to make sure that I make it clear, while call volume is going up, that shouldn't be taken by any of you that the sky is falling, that the community is less safe. All I'm saying is that our demands and our calls for service are up, but we're always looking at ways to lower the crime.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else on police? On budget, not on operations.
I just had a follow-up. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I just had a follow-up to Mr. Hurley's question about education. I was wondering or curious how many officers have military experience?
I send an email out every year on Veterans Day to the officers, and I believe, I want to say we have 12 officers that have served in the military. What? Okay, so it might be around 17, 12 or 17, and I apologize, and I'm humbled by not knowing that because I should know that. I believe it's probably right around 17 officers that have prior military service. We have some officers that are still in the National Guard, but we do have officers from every branch of the service, including one in the Coast Guard. And they are in a variety of different positions. Some are supervisors. One is in the room, Lieutenant Green is in the room here, who has served overseas in the Marine Corps. So, yeah, we have about 17.
Thank you. On budget. Go ahead.
Hi, it's Jay Walk, District 5 again. I've asked during the years, I've asked Chief McNamara and Chief Liddy, the amount of officers that you guys have. Is it enough? I found that other towns have had more officers on their force with less population than we have. I'm wondering, are we still on line with hiring officers that, more help for you guys, or is it, in your feeling, do you feel, does that make sense? I mean,
Yeah, no, I think if you ask me whether I think we should have more officers, the answer is yes, we should have more officers. If you ask me whether or not we should have more officers given the realistic financial crisis facing the town, the answer obviously is no. I think that our overtime does cover some of those needs and some of those gaps, which dollar for dollar probably is cheaper than hiring more officers. But I think at this point, we have a very solid police department, a solid group of men and women, and to increase or request to increase the budget at this point, I don't think is necessary and wouldn't even request it. Yeah.
I often also look at the times that our agency has to declare like a broken arrow, and it has to call in surrounding agencies to help us handle normal call volume. And in the last year, we haven't had to do that once. The year before, I think we had two occasions where we had to call in help. So I think we're doing okay right now.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here this evening. We appreciate it.
ECC. Any ECC questions?
Oh, anything for the
'Cause that would
ECC?
be next on the list.
Seeing none, we're all good. Thank you. Okay, Public Works, 50/50 Building Department. Thank you for being here. Just introduce yourself for the record, Mr. Conley,
Yes.
and we'll go right to Q&A.
Good evening, Tom Conley, Building Department.
Any questions for the Building Department? Seeing none, thank you very much. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Vergara.
Hi, Jill Vergara, District 7. I saw that your revenue went up by 0.86%. It was listed as 2.06 million this year. Considering all of the building, though, going on, especially around this area and the beach, I'm surprised that it hasn't gone up more from building permits and such. Can you explain a little bit about the revenue that you generate from the building permits?
Sure. I think we took a 3-year average, seeing that the average had gone up consistently in the past 3 years. We took that approach to it. It's really difficult to decide because most of our revenue, or a lot of our revenue, comes from the universities. So it's really iffy as to how much work they're going to do out there. We do know they have a lot of work coming up. I took a modest approach because some of my numbers were based on some of the solar, the increase in solar, and I wasn't really sure about how much solar we would be doing. So basically, I took the 3-year average.
Is there an extra charge for demolition? So if there's a tear down, is there an extra charge for that?
Well, there is a charge. It is a standalone permit regulated by state statute. So we do take a permit for that, and then an actual permit for the build out. So yes.
And when someone does a renovation to their home that increases the square footage or maybe the bedrooms, does that initiate the process for revaluation for tax purposes?
We hope so. Yes, it does. All of our building permits are given right over to the tax assessor the minute we take them in. So we assess them a value, we send it to them, they do a square footage based on their values.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else on the Building Department? Do you have a question, Tom? Oh, you're good. All right, we're all good. Thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you very much.
Next up, 6070, Solid Waste and Recycling. Good evening, gentlemen. Introduce yourselves for the record, please.
Mike Zimbrewski, Director of Solid Waste and Recycling.
Ed Bowman, Assistant Director of Public Works.
Questions on solid waste and recycling? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here. Next up, 5011, Public Works Administration. Welcome, gentlemen. Just introduce yourselves and we'll go right to Q&A.
Good. Joe Michelangelo, Director of Public Works.
Scott Bartlett, Superintendent of Public Works.
Questions on Public Works Administration? Representative McDermott.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Gentlemen, good evening. Thanks for coming. I just had a question. Looking at the budget, the Assistant Director of DPW is a .85. Where is the other .15 in the budget?
Okay, Mr. Bowman is the Assistant Director of Public Works, and 15% of his time is charged to the WPCA budget. So in WPCA, you'll see there's 20.15 full-time employees. The 15 is Mr. Bowman.
I just couldn't find it earlier today. And then this part-time clerk at $16,538, is that a necessary position?
Yes, it is. So it's to cover the office. There's one full-time employee in the Independence Hall office. There's one full-time employee in the sewer department, and we regulate that. Right now, it's 3 days a week, 10 to 2. Largely covers the lunch times of the other two employees, and when employees take vacation time, she also fills in during that time too.
Thank you.
Anyone else on administration? Vergara.
I saw that you help with the improvements for the Burr Mansion and the Victorian Cottage. Is there a way to estimate how much work was put into those buildings?
That's on operations.
It's not on operations?
Nor on administration.
Oh, I saw it in the Public Works Administration description.
Oh, all right, maybe I'm wrong, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, and just as an overview, so you know the 4 full-time employees in Public Works Administration, we oversee all the functions of the Public Works Department, including the Solid Waste Department, operations, engineering, street lighting, WPCA, and town building. So, you know, as far as how we carve up the time, whether it's, 2% of our time or 3%, once again, just like Mr. Bowman's 15% for WPCA, it's a bit fungible, but, several percentage points of our time probably to those historic properties on the town green campus.
Representative Georgiades.
Hello, Drew Georgiades, District 9. You're probably going to have significant cuts in this budget, and I was so impressed last year with the long-term strategies and the short-term strategies and how with the paving and the road maintenance and whatnot. Can you paint a picture for how this year will be, your long-term, short-term plan will be impacted by this budget?
Okay, and that's largely in Public Works Operations, but I'll be glad to talk about it.
We can just jump in. No, that's fine. We can just jump into operations. That's fine.
So the requested.
Administration, I'm sorry.
Yep, that's a line item in the Public Works Operations budget, and the department request was $3 million, which was, even the request was slightly lower than the $3.35 million from the previous year. So $3 million we feel is a steady state to be able to maintain our 275 roads in acceptable condition. So with that, obviously, having 2/3 of the money, some tough choices have to be made on which ones we do. So once again, we're resolved to figuring out how to solve the issue with the $2 million. And I'll give an example, just, every one of your driveways, I could go to every one of your driveways and look at them, and a couple of your driveways with a shovel, I could tear apart your driveway, by hand. And the way I could do that is I'll look for a seam or a crack. So once you get a seam or a crack, I could literally destroy the sidewalk by hand. Not every one, but the worst 2 or 3 or 5 of them. Well, if I could do that by hand, that's what our winter weather does, that's what our summer weather does, beats them up. So that's when we decide where to spend our $2 million. For this year, we'll look at which ones are going to be most vulnerable to not surviving the immediate impact of the year. And some of the other ones that aren't in danger for this year or next year, those are ones we're going to defer on. So how we're going to divide up that $2 million pie is a lot of, the worst case bandage type repairs.
And then can you address how that will impact long-term? As the budget looks like it's going to remain difficult year to year to year for the next probably 5 years.
Okay. Well, hopefully this is a one-time reduction of the $2 million, and we could get back into the, the normal programming in future years. But yeah, if $2 million is the new step going forward, the new status quo going forward, yeah, in the long term, our roads will suffer as it goes on. And one of the things that Mr. Bartlett talked about at several of the meetings, he knows these prices off the back of his hand, the square footage prices. And once the road gets to 12, 15, 18 years with nothing done on it, then you're paying the big bucks. You're basically starting from scratch like your driveway. You're basically taking out all the asphalt, some of the gravel, building it from the ground up to the top instead of just a rehab maintenance
And disposing of
procedure.
that. And the disposal.
Correct, yeah.
Representative Ambrose and then Representative Zezima.
Peter Ambrose, yes. Joe, the cost of materials, have been rather steady. We've been quite lucky, I assume, for the last 4 or 5 years with the price of oil and all that. Have you seen a spike in the cost of materials?
Actually, this year, we think it's favorable, and I'll let Scott talk directly to that.
That is correct. This year is favorable. We have a good market for the procedures. But to dovetail back into what Joe said, the proper way to maintain our infrastructure is you take the mileage that we own, 275 miles of roadway. We take our parking lots and we convert the square area of our parking lots into road miles, which is 13.3 miles. So our responsibility is 288.3 miles. The proper way to maintain that is to put surface treatments onto those roads, and you should be spending the money appropriate to seal 288 miles of road. So this $1 million cut is going to make us below 200 miles of investment in our infrastructure. That's a losing proposition for us. So to go back to your point, Drew, we do anticipate costs will go up in the long run, even though we have a good market today. We don't know what the future holds, but more importantly, what I could put a $2 seal or a $5 square yard seal on today might cost me more money in the future based on what it needs. If it's a $7 or $8 fix based on its condition in 2 or 3 years, it's going to cost us more. But our goal is to maintain and put into the infrastructure 288 miles worth of work annually. Anything below that, we fall behind our maintenance schedule. Anything above that, we can gain ground.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Representative Zezima.
Liz Asma, District 4. Thank you guys for taking such good care of our town. In the same vein, so if you buy, in terms of procurement, your material purchasing would go down because you're doing less paving. So do you lose economies of scale on what you're paying for materials because you're not buying the same quantities or?
No, we do not. Currently, with all the different applications we apply, they're either town bids or state bids, but there's no material discount for quantity, so we're in good shape as far as that goes.
All right, good.
And once we're well over the minimum anyway, so to speak. If we were doing...
There's no threshold.
Correct, yeah. We're
Thank you.
above the threshold.
Representative Gerber.
Hey, Joe and Scott, Bill Gerber, District 2. Can you remind me what the status is of the UI enhanced tree trimming, tree cutting regulations, and the sort of strain, is that, it doesn't look like it's putting a strain on your resources? Are you getting a lot of requests for exemptions and things like that?
So Jeff Minder, the tree warden, works under us in our department. So he works with the UI in the permissioning of the trees. And the whole cycle that they were planning for Fairfield was a 7-year cycle, and I believe we're in year 2. And, Jeff, he's very involved with the UI, spends a great deal of his time investigating these, working with property owners. There are cases where, even like about a month ago, where they were, I wouldn't say they were in disarray, but they were sort of ahead of themselves, where they were going too fast, they were leaving messes on large stretches of road. So literally, Jeff put the brakes on them and said, you're not cutting any other trees until the site is cleaned up. But he, out of the UI towns, I think he does, in Fairfield, whereas, as thorough and, making sure that our trees are preserved as much as possible as any other town. So did I answer your specific question, or?
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking back to when I was going door to door. Actually, this came up over and over again, people concerned that they were going to have to cut their trees down, and it made me think that you're going to be getting a lot of requests. I mean, people were asking me to actually intercede on their behalf about their beloved trees in their front yard, which, I can't blame them. So I'm just curious about the resources that the constraints that, if UI is in a rush to get this done, does this put constraints on your resources?
And I'd say, the tree warden is able to handle it, and he's doing a good job protecting our interests. So, I don't think you could point to any road in Fairfield where you could say, that road has been scalped. I don't think we have any of those nightmares like you see in other communities. So it's working with the UI, working with the property owners, and I think, there hasn't been any nightmares.
No, like legal issues related to this?
There hasn't been any, big contentious issue that's come to the forefront. Everything has been able to be resolved.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks.
Representative McDermott.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mark McDermott, District 7. I'm just wondering, you just did all the roads down here, but like Riverside, down South Benson, a lot of roads in there, and right after you finished them, I guess it was the gas company came in and dug everything up and was laying, I don't know what they're laying, pipe or, do you have to go back in at some point and fix that? Because it doesn't, I mean, look, it was a beautiful roadways down there, and now it just looks like it looked before you guys did the work.
So the short answer is no. We are in fact going back there, but on their dime. So we're making them restore those roads to the condition they were before the construction, and they're paying for it, but it's through our vendor, so we have quality control in terms of what application goes on.
Great, thank you.
And we do work with utilities, and they have our list, we have their list, and literally they said those roads were clear, and then after we did the work, the pressure line, the lines in those area, the old Southern Connecticut gas lines are low pressure lines. They're eventually going to transition everyone to the high pressure lines, and a lot of their reasoning was that in that area there, it was subject to saltwater intrusion because there's low pressure pipe and it's more susceptible to damage. But yeah, we asked that question, a dozen times. Didn't you know that in October? How come you knew this in December and you didn't know this in October?
But to your point, that repair work's done on their dime then, in terms of budget?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just going to clarify, when we say it's on UI's dime, it's really on all of our dimes, because as ratepayers. So if there's a way to better coordinate, that'd be great, because it comes back to us one way or the other.
Well, and that's the gas line, so it's on your dime if you're a gas customer.
But your point's well taken. We're just as equally disappointed, because to Joe's point, before we release our list in terms of what we're going to do, all the utilities have that list, the Aquarian Water Company, UI Gas Company. We got the all clear signal, and then they came in with the big oops. But you're right, indirectly, anybody who has gas does in fact pay for it, yes.
Additional questions? I have a question about the fill pile down at the dump. Where is that in this budget? The, shall I call it beautification project?
Okay.
Where do I find that line item in here?
Okay. And the construction of the berm and the landscaping is approximately $75,000, and that will be out of the current year's operating budget. And that's the sort of maximum amount we feel we could save if we eliminate walls, things to those matters, but we've, whatever money for that project will be encumbered in this fiscal year.
This fiscal year.
The current fiscal year.
And then the remediation that we have to go through, since they found the PCBs, is that budgeted for this upcoming budget, or how is that being handled?
No, so the remediation work is out for bid now. I think the bids are due in the end of this month, and we fully intend to go after the contractor for all the money involved is not in any town budget.
All right, so we're going to encumber that number and then try and recoup it from the contractor.
Well, we're going to try to recoup it. I'll leave it to the finance department what the mechanism is for, for securing the money and then getting it back.
Okay, but right now we don't have anything budgeted for that per se. We're going to try and recover it through other means.
Correct.
Understood. Thank you. Representative Perugini.
Bill Perugini, District 9. What is that number? Do you have an idea? I mean, I'm sure it's probably going to get bigger and the picture's going to look more and more bleak. But right now, what is that number?
We'll have contractors give us that price in 3.5 weeks. I'm not a remediation contractor to give up we have the quantities, but as far as what a ton per ton price is, I don't know.
So, I mean, no rough idea, no forecast of, so we've found a few things there that didn't look good, and I would bet that the deeper we look, the more we search, the more we're going to find things that are not pleasant. But any rough idea?
No, I wouldn't want to, I don't think it does any help if I give a number tonight when we're going to have one in 3 weeks, so.
Okay. Thanks.
Joe, when did you say the bids are due back on that? I'm sorry.
April 25th, Scott, just told me.
Representative McCarthy, did you have a question?
With regard to your capital, I'm thinking here specifically about your fleet, and if you could, I understand we all know we've asked you to kind of reshuffle the deck a couple of times relative to the plan you had for bringing the fleet up to date. But could you compare the state of the fleet as it is at this point in time relative to where it was, say, 4 years ago before you had come before this body to bond purchase of a number of large trucks, which we've agreed to fund?
Yeah.
Are we in a better position today than we were 4 years ago at that point in time?
I'd say right now we're better because we had some significant trucks dedicated. So we had 7 all at one time. We had 4. We've purchased 1 thus far this year. Actually 2 thus far this year. So with the amount over the last 4 years, we're not as bad as we were. We've made progress with those purchases. But given that in the current fiscal year, there are currently 2 on hold because of the budget constraints. And as it plays out thus far, there'll be 1 vehicle purchase this year. So, I still don't think that sets us back to where we were 4 years ago, but, if we need to purchase 3 or 4 a year and we get 3 over a 2-year spread, that is a step backwards. And with next year not looking favorable either, we may be right back where we were, 4 years ago, where,
Okay. This obviously came up in the Board of Finance meeting, and in terms of your plan, and so I think you're back to a new plan at this point in time. Is that a fair statement?
Well, correct. Yeah, we'll after we see what the what becomes of the current fiscal year and what gets approved next year, yeah, we're ready to, do the State of the Nation report on trucks and, and when you see the standard deviation for the trucks, the curve has, it has as many trucks in the 80s and 90s as it does in the 0s and 10s. So, we need to, we need to lop off the 1990 trucks and get 2017s and 18s. And once again, that'll,
We'll have a retro day now and again, but...
Yeah, so once again, after everything shakes out this year, there are 47 such trucks, so it's trucks, sweepers, loaders, so it's, it's pretty easy to show the, the standard deviation with the, with the spikes of where they are, and, it's, we'll be doing that following the budget process.
And I should say, we do appreciate you getting as much life out of the trucks as you can, especially in times like this. And I know Scott certainly spoke to that, and we need your help, and we appreciate you stepping up.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Do you have any vacancies in your department right now?
We have one. We have one because we had a foreman who retired, and I think his retirement just became official April 1st. So that is the only vacancy at this time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
If I may, appreciate and recognize the town in wishing to keep payroll in line, but caution us that we also celebrate a weekend shift that dramatically reduces Department of Public Works spending. So those are employees that work a Thursday through Monday shift, then we don't pay overtime for Saturday and Sunday, and they cover needs. So the risk we run, we can celebrate if we don't want to replace an employee because we lose that cost, but the offset of that is we lose the benefit of an employee at a lower rate doing straight time activities to cover us 7 days a week, 52 weekends a year.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you for setting things up that way, too. Representative Lee.
What is the impact of these six-wheel dump trucks? What do you guys do with those?
Now, that's the vehicle we own the most of. That's the, the heart and soul of our operation. Those get used, every one of those trucks gets used every single day for road work, building on town grounds. So everything we do, that's the backbone of every Public Works Department's operation. That's our main construction vehicle, our main snow plowing vehicle. It's everything.
So if one of them is not working, you have to, if it snows, find something, maybe hire somebody to come in and plow, or do you have enough trucks to cover that, or?
Well, and I'll let Scott add too, but we'll either, hire out or we'll play zone. So if we have, 24 trucks on a route and 2 of them go down and there's no backups to replace them, just like, there'll be 22 trucks covering 24 areas and everybody will nibble on the side.
Our true model of success would be to have enough trucks to do pre-treat in the winter as well as fight snow. For years, the industry standard was the snow fell and you spent your time, responding to the snow and melting the snow. The new standard is to prevent the icing in the first place. So what we find ourselves doing is if it's going to snow on a Friday, we're out there with 3 trucks pre-treating. We then strip those trucks Thursday afternoon to get them ready for Friday night or Friday's snowfall. So the short answer to your question is we don't have enough to perform adequately in our fleet to do the level of service we think the industry standards tell us to do. We hold most of our vehicles, so we do have a fair amount of backup trucks when they actually go out and plow. But again, some of those are 1980s, and they're in the garage, and they're there when the 2015 breaks, but I'm not pre-treating with 1,000 gallons of liquid on it 2 days earlier either. I don't know if that answers it, but that's kind of the brutal reality of where we are.
And the follow-up to that is, do those trucks go out with one person? Now I'm talking probably April through October when you're doing construction work. Is there one person in that cab, 2, 3?
Generally speaking, it's one. The times you will see two is because if we leave equipment on a drainage project, then the operator will drive out with the truck driver to the job. But typically, the way we're structured is we'll have one lead man who has the utility truck. That's all the tools the men will need, cut-off saws, shovels, etc. And then, depending on the extent of the job, it could be multiple dump trucks, one taking supplies, stone, dirt, whatever. The other one's taking spoils off the job, and then the operator, payloader or backhoe. So it's a 3 to 4 man crew, 1 to 2 dump trucks.
I guess what I was getting at there is if you have a truck that doesn't work, do you have men standing there looking at that truck waiting for it to run? That's a cost.
Yeah, that's an absolute cost, but in fairness, we're not that bad yet. The true impact is really in our winter operations, and it is stressful in terms of the equipment we use it sounds simple, so what? Have the crew come in a couple hours early and take the spreader off and put the conventional snow fighting equipment on. But if you're trying to pre-treat for 8 hours, you've now cut into your pre-treat. Part of the pre-treat is not only public safety, but it's reduced overtime. We're doing it as a straight time event. So if I struggle with pre-treat during straight time hours, I'm back to expending money for overtime. I'm not sure that's the best business plan.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Ambrose.
Yes, I see that you've got a chief mechanic and 5 additional mechanics. Are they active, full-time as mechanics? It seems to me that that's 6 mechanics that serve our vehicles. Is that?
It is 6 mechanics, so it might sound like a large number, but it's actually one of the strongest points of our budget. I look at the cost value if we privatize that work, and it's significantly higher than the cost of us doing it. I've never hidden the fact from this board or any boards that the reason we got out of parks buildings or parks maintenance isn't because we're anti-parks. We actually celebrate the parks, but our payroll can't stack up as well as the contractors can. So 6 may seem like a large number, but to meet the mandates of safety, and all our big trucks go through twice a year safety checks for inspections. For them to carry that load, we find 6 to be the right number. My garage manager would prefer 7, but 6 does work for us. One of those is also dovetailed into our welding. So it's actually 6 people, 5 mechanics and 1 welder. But he also is a mechanic. So what we do with his workflow is pretty straightforward. If there's welding, he does it. If they're backed up mechanically, he does that as well.
Thanks for the explanation.
You're welcome.
And that supports the other town departments too. So other than the PD and fire, they have their own mechanics. So the building inspector's vehicle, the planning and zoning, the health department vehicles, all their vehicles are maintained, conservation. They're all maintained by our public works mechanics also.
That's nice to know. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, engineering, 5070.
Okay.
You handling that, Joe?
Thank you. Bill Hurley is celebrating his birthday tonight.
Oh, happy birthday to Mr. Hurley.
So Mr. Hurley works directly for me, and I'll answer any questions on his budget. It's largely a salary-based budget, 7 full-time employees working out of Independence Hall.
Any questions on engineering? Seeing none, thank you. Thanks for being here this evening. And the last item on the agenda for this evening is the WPCA.
Okay. So the WPCA is the Water Pollution Control Authority, which is our sewer plant on Richard White Way and our 200 miles of pipe. It's largely a user fund, self-supporting budget. Bill Norton has been our superintendent since 2015, came to us after about 30 years with other municipalities. Once again, the budget is $5.47 million, which is approximately a 1% decrease from the previous year. 20 full-time employees, Bill was able to reduce 1 out of the total workload. And once again, it's outside of the general fund. It's a separate user-paid-for budget.
Questions on the WPCA, Representative Ambrose?
So the sewer use charges that we pay as residents, they go into the general fund?
No, they go into the WPCA fund balance. So 95% of the WPCA budget is paid for by the user fees. The other 5% is other WP, like restaurant fees, some, application fees, but that's basically apart from the general fund ad valorem taxes.
Thank you.
Further questions on the WPCA? Seeing none, that's all we have tonight. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes our hearing for this evening. We'll be back tomorrow night, and if committee chairs want to meet with their committee, they're more than welcome to do so. Otherwise, we will hold over till tomorrow. Thank you all.